Exactly 4 minutes to 10 o'clock right here on Kenya's home of untold stories, TV47. Thank you for staying with us. I'm George Maringa. On sign language interpretation is Calvin Makori. My guest still here in studio, Dr. Moses Mwangi on the far right. Thank you so much for staying with us. A political commentator, Maliba Arnold, head of policy and public affairs at UDA, the ruling party. Thank you, Maliba, for also staying with us. As well as Mark Bichachi, an analyst and communications strategist, joining us from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Bichachi, Maliba.
Yes.
Apologies. Allow me to, you describe this as a watershed year.
Yeah.
Your party is one that has been accused of not really following the promises it kept. In fact, the promises that you made during the campaigns have been argued to somewhat come and haunt the party and the party leader due to the many promises that have been made. We're even seeing a lot of, the 500 million shillings. By the way, what was that about? That was paid to the Grammys, and you've seen the activity on social media, I'm sure. I mean, are these too many mishaps? Are they too many? Are they too obvious? What's happening within the party?
First, George, you'll allow me to actually read just 3 paragraphs from Things Fall Apart. As a starting way, it will be a better way of actually us having this conversation, at least from where I come from and how we see it. If you look at chapter 3 of Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe's chapter 3 of Things Fall Apart, it says that the year that Okonkwo took 800 seed yams from Noakibe was the worst year in living memory. Nothing happened in its proper time. It was either too early or too late. It seemed as if the world had gone mad. The first rains were late, and when they came, they lasted only a brief moment. The drought continued for 8 market weeks, and the yams were killed. The year had gone mad. When the rains finally returned, they fell as if it had never fallen before. Trees were uprooted and deep gorges appeared everywhere. That year, the harvest was sad. Like a funeral, and many farmers wept as they dug up the miserable and rotting yams. One man tied his cloth to a tree branch and hanged himself. Okonkwo remembered that tragic year with a cold shiver throughout the rest of his life. It always surprised him when he thought about it later that he did not sink under the load of despair. He knew he was a fierce fighter, but that year had been enough to break the heart of a lion. Since I survived that year, he always said, I will survive anything. That for me would be the easiest way of actually looking at 2024 as a Kenyan, leave alone as a person who works for the ruling party and the leader of society. Now, we must look at this year properly, that nothing sits where it's always sat, that the foundations of the nation were shaken, that it's easy to actually point out. But then as a nation, as we get to the end of the year, probably it's important for us to actually start talking to each other. What is happening is that we are busy talking at each other. We in government can actually come out and point out the things we've done right. And there are so many of them, by the way, that it will take you 2 shows, complete end to end, for us to actually just list them out. Enough. And then the people who are also putting us to oversight also have got a list of the things that have actually not gone through. I actually say that this year and going forward is actually going to be a test to the communication industry in this country, to the people who call themselves media experts, the communication experts, to actually get this country to talk to each other and talk to itself. We are at a place where we actually need that. This one is a trying moment. So I need to say this, that having said that, it's important for me to actually underscore this fact, that we are not where we promised Kenyans we will be. This, even from where we sit, we know and we appreciate and acknowledge that as a regime, we are not and we have not delivered what we promised Kenyans. But in our defense, it's also important for us to point out this, that we've also not been sleeping on the job. That given the background against which we've actually worked, looking at how the year was, I will tell you the year was mad. In the words of Okonkwo, I can actually tell you the year was mad. We also have done some work. So whereas we are not where we wanted to be, we are not where we used to be. And allow me to qualify that. That 4 or 5 years ago, economists And even very competent agencies, international agencies like the World Bank and so many other organizations expected that Kenya would burst and go bankrupt by mid-2023. It's out there. I even wrote articles 5 years ago to the same, that the way we were running the country, we would not survive past 2022. That we averted. It didn't happen just because rains fell.
Okay.
We worked on that. But then there are the promises that we put through. For the last 10 years, or for the last 2 years, the first year, we had the Azimio demonstrations going on throughout, and we could not work as effectively as we wanted. Of course, it's easy to actually say that a poor workman blames his tools. But the truth is that a country is not an individual personal business where I will run it under my own conditions. It has got people, it has got stakeholders, and then it has got a constitution to work by. So there was that. 2023, a very difficult year also. Then there was 2024, where we had demonstrations no one had actually thought about. Literally, we thought the Republic was going under. So, working under those difficult circumstances, starting with the disputed election in 2023, we always had demonstrations going on, and then we have got 2024, we have got a civil, almost an insurrection, and then, of course, we've tried to cross bridges to the point where ODM, for example, would think, in the interest of the Republic, we can actually offer the government of the day a hand. Because then the alternative is that then we sink the country, and recovery is always very difficult. It's easy for people to say, burn this thing to the ground, burn it to the ashes, and then we build afresh. Tell that to the people in Libya. Very, very easy to actually push that line of thinking. Tell the people in Iraq about that. Even Syria, which is now the newest child, not so far, talk to people in Sudan and see how that works out. So there are promises made. Realistically, we are at a point, and I know in government speak, we've always been told that you should not concede anything. But the truth is that looking at these circumstances we are in, it's important that we speak to each other. How do we speak to each other if we don't make some concessions? Like literally, I live in this country, so if I'm going to tell you that we've gotten everything we promised, I'll actually be telling a white lie.
Those who speak, one, are criticized. Two, they are absorbed into government. We'll be coming to that. Daktari, when you look at how he brings up the part of, conversations and conversing with each other, but there is a sense, there's a feeling of what the executive has termed lack of patriotism. I don't know how you would pick it from Kenyans if you look at it from the other side. And where would this ideally be coming from? Is it from a point of frustration, disappointment? Are they angry that whatever was promised has not been delivered? Or are the promises taking too long? Where would you, what would you call this that is being termed by members of the UDA party as unpatriotism?
Now, let's begin from appreciating the role of leadership. That everything rises and falls at leadership. If you see a performing school, look for the principal and the board and the way they work. If you see any performing nation, look at the leadership. Because the role of leadership is to shape the direction that the country or the institution should take. I think we are ending the year in a better way, where the president and his team had a Damascus moment when they realized that they needed to talk to everybody. So in a way, starting the year with a situation where you don't want to hear the opposite side, and whatever they say is no good, to a point where you say, yes, we are ready to listen. So in a way, where we are as a country is as a result of the leadership, the attitude of the leadership from the beginning, the people that were put in government in the first instance. I think by the time the cabinet was constituted, everybody who knows how a country should be run knew that this is a cabinet that cannot deliver the very promises that were made. And the government was able to realize that at some point and make some changes and allow and accommodate people from the opposition. In my view, if you ask me, yes, we are heading the country well this year when people are talking to each other, but you're in a very bad state when it comes to politics, because we are a multi-party democracy. And a multi-party democracy is anchored on the fact that there is a performing ruling coalition and there is a performing opposition. Now, to have a situation where you have a country where now in the seat of power, that is in the legislature, we can never really be sure whether we have a serious opposition, because the opposition that is absorbed in government. Yes, it stabilizes the country for now, but in terms of conversation, checks and balances, because if you don't have the checks and balances, then you are likely to end up in the wrong direction. And there is one thing that we don't want to go back to. We came from a one-party dictatorship. Yeah. We do not want to get back there. And therefore, whereas the president has been able to manage his politics and the politics of the Kenya Kwanza government to stabilize the country, which is good, because no one would benefit from a sinking ship. But having said that, we got where we got because the leadership in place did not, listen to the people, and early enough, it had to take a kind of a revolution by a sleeping giant that we had not noticed. It's a good thing that the Gen Z realized that now they can speak. And we believe, and I hope they keep the momentum so that in the next election they will have they will go out and cast their vote and be able to shape the direction. Absolutely. And in my perspective, the Shekeia, remember, yes, although I agree with my brother here when he quotes things for a part with regard to how things have gone, but let's look at it from the weather perspective. You know, we came from a serious drought, and Southern Africa right now is going through what we went through. And remember, there's a time one of the ministers who was then removed in Kenya was saying we should buy land or we should go and farm in Zambia. But right now, that's not a good idea, because right now they are going through the cycle of the drought that we experience. But this has been a good year when it comes to weather, except that right now we'll do with some rain in this short rain season, but the long rain season really was very good for the country. So we have bumper harvest, we have food. I hope the Kenya Kwanza government can take advantage of this plenty of food and like Joseph in Egypt, build granaries, make sure that this food is kept, because who knows about the next few years, because, you know, we go in cycles. Therefore, I think, yes, at the end of the year, I think the president is in a better state in terms of, you can see the attitude he's willing to hear. He's reaching out to people he would not have wanted to talk to. Now he's talking to them, and that's a good thing. Okay. And we appreciate the fact that even the president, when he's reached out to, he's willing to respond. That is acting like a nationalist. And even Raila Odinga, at the point, although we will get to know whether he was he gave out his heart so that he could get the support to run for African Union. Okay. I think by March or April next year, we'll get to know whether it was. But at the spur of the moment, it has helped the country. Okay.
Let's bring in Bichachi. Bichachi, thank you for staying on the line with us. Now, broad-based is the new term of what the UDA party chose to involve everyone When you look at it from an African perspective as well, and Maliba talks about communication, do you think that then the morphing of opposition into government has had the ripple down effect that perhaps the initiators of this move would have expected? One, in terms of political temperatures, and two, service delivery, so that then you'd find that the bile and the opposition has not died down in terms of what the president keeps saying, let us all work together.
First and foremost, let me agree with Maliba that the communication needs to be looked into quite seriously in the country of Kenya. And as I'm being there, and I don't want to dilute his, I would like to remind him that square for the people who lost their lives there, the many people who lost their lives in Syria. Yes, there may be chaos in those countries, but let us not water down the citizens who hoped for a better country, who hoped a better economy, who hoped for more freedoms. Let us not forget that Kenya itself once fought a beberu, and that beberu, when he left, yes, we had teething problems, but we made it. And that is the tone that is missing. There is a serious tone that is missing in this country, and it's not missing because we do not know it as communications experts. It is missing because we are not speaking to the hearts of the people. Yes, indeed, 2024 had floods that were caused by people and floods that were caused by acts of God. The question is, the children of the nation of Kenya, how do they feel and how do they feel today? When we look at the country, when the price of fuel goes down by 8 shillings and another 2 shillings, and then the Kenyan people don't react to it, we are in danger. When the price of food and commodities reduces and the people are still not reacting, we are in danger. And it is not just a communication issue. It is an issue that the hearts and the emotions of the Kenyan people have been removed from their government. And what is being felt by Arnold, my dear friend, and others is not unpatriotism, it is pain. It is deep and sincere pain. It is such a deep pain that I was saddened to see young people now doing a dance called Mapangale, where they put their hands on each other's necks, pretending to be cutting each other's necks down. It is a sign of depression. When you look at a country that is continually groaning, when you look at a country where the other day kids in Eldoret, I'm told, were being taught how to do online scams, when Interpol is treating Kenya as though it's Nigeria, then you know that the pain is much deeper. Now, let's give the government its flowers. 180 shillings to the dollar at some point. Now, 129, 130. Let's look at the price of unga. Let's look at the stabilization of our debt. Let's look at so many things that are going right. But let us not then also absolve ourselves of the very real issues that the government needs to deal with. And as a communications expert, I would tell them that, for example, Shah and Shif is a pain point. It's not a pain point like Adani was, no. It is a pain point in the sense that Kenyans do not feel taken care of, they do not feel loved. They need that tender touch. That is what Kenya is crying for. And when there is tenderness, Kenya will come together, coalesce. But again, I must insist that in Kenya, yes, there is opposition. It might be in the shape of Kalonzo Musyoka and Eugene Wamalwa. We might not like it, but there is opposition. But let me also remind fellow Kenyans that it is the objective of any president in a presidential system to convince as many MPs to be on his side. The question then is not what the president is doing, it is what your MP is doing. So when you put all of this together, let us also not forget that there must be positive tension between the people and her government continually. What do I mean by positive tension? For as long as the people are agitating for better, that is positive tension. When the people are asking for better roads, positive tension. Better leadership, positive tension. And that positive tension is good for you. You must understand that being a leader is like being an athlete. Your coach is not your friend. Your coach tells you, give me 15, give me another 10. You say you are tired, he asks you for another 20. That is where Kenya is. We are at a place where we are rebirthing ourselves as a nation. And I think on that perspective, the president and the people speak the same. He says he has a vision, he wants to birth a new country. The people want a new country. So what needs is tenderness and acceptance of each other and continuation of that positive tension that is pushing not only the leadership, but the people towards a more positive country.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Let's come back to studio. And Maliba and perhaps the three gentlemen, in fact, all of you, you can help even answer this. Now, some feedback from Kenyans. Yeah. Reverend Kennedy Kobira Kakamega saying, curiously watching the debate, kindly, are you aware that Kenyans are building a wall? They say New Wongo in brackets. Taxes are too many. It is a corrupt government. The words are in the villages, in the streets, in towns, and in houses. What are you doing so that you can be trusted as a government? And we can coin that with, this is, Gilbert, I think. He says, anyway, thank you for the show. Ask Mr. Maliba, do they really get the right feelings of Kenyans from the ground, or those close to the president are lying to him? They don't have to justify what has been done. It's Kenyans to feel and tell. 2, is the government too much into taxes to an extent? Private sector don't even employ people anymore. Government too doesn't. What happened to over 60 years people still working in government when the youth are becoming hopeless day by day for joblessness? Was the president lying when he said he will relieve them? 3, housing. What happens to those youths working on the sites? Once the constructions on the site ends, they become jobless. A lot of what is being asked here, Arnold, and perhaps you can even tell us the discussions in the party, there seems to be an out-of-touch situation again. In terms of, even as the year ends, as we look forward to 2025, Kenyans do not feel like UDA, the ruling party, feels them.
Truth is that if you look at the president's, I'm saying as we expect the president's Christmas wishes to the Republic, and even his New Year message will actually be reflective of where we are as a people. We are at a place where you can actually not pull magic. We are at a place where all of us must actually come back to the point where we say, first of all, we have got a republic. The soul of the republic, number one, to ensure that it's actually secure. And then from there, see where we are. It's like Mark said, it's a year that you had 4 years into it. So much went into this year. And we must actually get to a place that actually concedes the fact that this year was not a normal year for us. That whereas God was very graceful to us, gave us rain, and through our hard work, because even if God sent us rain and we never worked hard, we never put in that hard work, we didn't put in input, we did not work around policy that ensured that it worked, that rain will actually have gone to waste, other than, of course, help our forests. So we are at a place where we as a regime, and I will actually say this repeatedly, that we feel Kenyans, we live in this country. We don't sleep on the moon and come back in the morning to actually administer state here. We live in this country. So when Kenyans raise those issues, we also partake of this particular economy. We go to the same supermarkets as you. What I actually want to put this out there today is that give us an opportunity to talk to you. We are not being heard. Partly, of course, because probably we actually have been obsessed with trying to actually talk about what we have done. It's time for us to actually talk about the situation as is. Because if everybody is right in this situation, we are not going to actually have a conversation. And that's why I said that we actually have got a very interesting moment in this country where the communication people, if we really think that we actually have got a communication industry that knows its stuff, this is the time where you actually will ask them to actually help us get to talk to each other. Like the Reverend has actually said, there has been a wall created by the people, And fairly for good reasons, by the way. That in the past, there are things that have been said that didn't turn out to be correct. There are things that were actually promised and weren't delivered. And from a reductionist way of doing things, and by the way, you cannot also not blame the activists, the civil society, and them that are actually doing oversight for picking an approach. For example, I'll tell you that if you look at the oversight that is actually being given to us, is a very reductionist one where you summarize government policy to the nearest bad thing. So you look at the finance bill, for example. You only pick 4 things out of a possible 3 million words out of that particular document. You pick 3 issues or 4 issues and run with them. So if you summarize the finance bill to 4 bad things out of so many thousands of budget lines, you actually are not being fair and objective in that particular process. So what am I saying? I am saying that truth is that all of us need to get to a place where we talk. Even wars, where people go to war, wars are finalized and they are solved in boardrooms. People have to talk to each other. And Maringa, I'll tell you this. The reason why people fight, and it's easy for us to shout at each other, is because people are afraid to talk. Let us talk. That conversation, talking is this, that we hear you, also hear us. And that means that we concede in places where things have not worked. I can tell you, no one in the Kenya Kwanza administration actually wakes up in the morning and decides that we're going to actually tell Kenyans things that do not work. As in, the body politic of this country, the political psyche of the people has actually changed in a way that you just don't wake up in the morning. You see, propaganda will not do. PR stunts will not do. You will have to actually come up with the policies that work, deliberate policies that work. And then we have got the Constitution 2010 that forces us to include the people in the process of in the management of public affairs. So we hear you. Let's just open ourselves to dialogue, because what is happening at the moment is that we in government summarize government policy and action to the nearest good thing that we have done. And we have got so many of them. And on the oversight side, we have got people whose only obsession is actually to summarize government action and statement to the nearest bad thing. And you run with that. So we are a country that is actually interested with cliches. Everybody running around we've become so reductionist in the way we talk to each other. And that does not help the republic. That does not help how we move forward, especially coming out of a difficult year like this. So we in government are actually leading by actually telling you that it's true. We are not where we told you we would want you guys to be. We have not delivered what we promised, but we have done something. So premised on that, then allow us to actually tell you why we have not made it and what we are doing about what has not been achieved, and ask for your support as we move forward. Okay. It's a difficult place to be, but for the republic to heal, for the economy to grow, for us to get moving forward, we must have that moment to talk. And we will talk to each other, not at each other. Difficult as it is.
Dr. Even as you look at matters broad-based and the opposition, there has been in fact an expectation of a certain party, certain group of politicians to be always in the opposition. So that then, like when we saw the broad-based situation, it was actually on the flip side, a situation that was unprecedented and they have the right actually to take up these jobs or not. In fact, Dennis Odhiambo is asking on YouTube, who said it's only ODM which should be in opposition, that when ODM joins government, opposition is dead? We need to be serious as Kenyans. How important is it for a country to have opposition, and perhaps even in this case for Raila Odinga to head to the AUC?
So how does a country get a ruling coalition, and how does it get an opposition? It is how we vote. And when we went to vote in 2022, the outcome of that vote was that the UDA and the Kenya Kwanza won the right to govern for 5 years. And the coalition, which was then the Azimio coalition, won the right to check the government. And if you remember, at the beginning of this tenure, indeed, the Kenyans voted for more members of parliament who were in Azimio than who were in the ruling coalition. But even before before the dust settled, some of them were wooed and they agreed to cross the floor, that giving the ruling coalition the majority they needed to carry out their agenda. And over the time, really, whether it is the MPs that were elected through Jubilee, they accepted against the wishes of the people to kind of look like they're in government. And in the end, it ended up weakening the opposition. It is not that ODM must be always the opposition, but they were the majority of the party in the coalition that was in the opposition, and therefore they were there to check on the government. And even now, as we speak, in spite of the fact that the luminaries of ODM entered government,
Yes.
even right now, who are the leaders of the minority in the National Assembly. Now, for purposes of making sure the country move forward, because Kenya is really the beacon of hope for democracy in this region, but I would think that 2024 will go down in history as one of the years where we took a back step in terms of our democracy. And we would hope that we would learn lessons into the future.
Into the future.
Looking at the conversation that my brother is talking about, the issue is who sets the agenda. The government should set the agenda. When the Kenyans feel that they are overtaxed, and those Kenyans are those that work and have a pay slip. When you look at the pay slip and you see declining take home, that means you are being disempowered from having more money that you can spend so that cash can flow around and business can flow around. And this, by the time we were coming to 2024 finance bill, it was hot on the heels of another 2023 finance bill that Kenyans had said is not good. And therefore, by the time now, the Kenyans were saying no. And having said that, as we end the year, we have seen some of those things they say no to in terms of taxation, getting back somehow. And the Kenyans will take it. At some point, you can't keep fighting. Sometimes you take a back step, and that's what they have taken. But if the government wants the right kind of conversation, the government needs to set the tone for the right kind of conversation. We saw Adani come in. We only got to know through a whistleblower. There was no proper follow-up. We've seen very important decisions being taken and only coming out. Today, for example, now we know that the government has a good plan to make sure that our schools get LPG. We hope that as we go forward, nothing has been worked out before, that things are now going to be worked out. That way you set the tone for conversation, and you create an element where there is mutual trust. But at the moment, we go to a point where there is no mutual trust between the rulers and the ruled. And at that point, the breakdown in that communication, to reset it, it is to say the right thing. Isn't it true that we had people in government that were chest thumping? Isn't it true that we had people in government that were parading their wealth against a situation where the rest of Kenyans were feeling squeezed and squeezed? Isn't it true that some of the leaders that were removed from cabinet were really unable to explain to the people even the good that the government was doing? We would now hope that when we see ministers being invited to National Assembly, we have seen them being sent back because they can't even answer simple questions. Until you wonder, were you in this? Does it have to take the president to explain every single thing that the government is doing? Doesn't he need people who can actually articulate those things and help him rule?
Indeed. Let's take a commercial break. We'll be going back to Bichachi. Bichachi, please stay on the line as well. We need to pay some bills, but when we come back, we continue this conversation. And please keep your feedback coming right here on the Daily Report.